I got kicked out of it because I got suckered into giving up my passwords under an email. It looked so legit. I got phished, and now I'm dealing with that. Uh, Sucks. All my pictures are on it.
Right.
Thanks for doing this, Tom.
Oh, my pleasure.
I'm gonna yeah, I'll hit record in a little bit, but I really enjoyed looking at your the video. It started out black and white. It was you just basically were talking about your childhood and everything.
Urban Valor.
Yeah, it was good. I really liked that.
Yeah, that worked out well. I was one of my Marines
You're in
that
California, right? I think.
yeah,
The way you were talking.
yeah, one of my Marines knows the guy who puts on the podcast. There's two guys who do it, and I was like, yeah, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this. It's out in out towards San Diego, L.A. I'm in New York, and then a friend of mine, his wife contacted me, and they were putting on a special event for him, and I was like, oh yeah, sure, I'll go out. I'll be there for the event, and then I'm like, oh hey, I'm going to be in San Diego. Contacted the guy, and he's like, yeah, sure, we can do the interview, and I'm like, all right, great.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Hey, before we start, is there any? I just want to make sure. Is there anything in particular you definitely want to make sure we hit? I know we'll talk about we're working like the charitable things that you do, and
I'm open to anything.
all right. I usually have I have some stuff jotted down. I wanted to kind of go from the gut talking to you. I didn't really want to. This is this is just to talk to you. Just a Marine. Just to, like every Thanksgiving I meet my platoon, and I just even when there's lulls in the conversation, like it's still awesome. But
Yep.
all right, let me. I'm gonna hit record right now, and then I'll just basically record this to cloud. Yes.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right. Gotta get I'm not ready for live podcast. I'll tell you that much.
Well, you're doing good so far.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Thank you very much. So, thank you, Gunny Claus, for joining my podcast. I met you at Comic-Con some time ago.
Yep. Had a great time at Comic-Con.
Very surprised at the time to see a Marine having his own table.
Yeah, well, that
a bunch of comic book artists, independent comic book artists, and comic books and merchandise, and then there's this Marine in his signature Gunny Claus outfit, his uniform.
Yep. Well, I mean, it worked out. I was actually there. I'd gotten a ticket through a friend who does the Saratoga Comic Con, and I was there supposed to help him with his booth, and a buddy of his didn't show up and couldn't show up, and he had already paid for the booth, and so through my friend I contacted him. I said, hey, do you mind if I set up Gunny Claus there? And he's like, no, go ahead. I go, do you want anything for it? Do you need anything for it? And he's like, no, I'm good. I'm like, okay, great. And so that's how I got the booth.
How many days were you set up there?
I was there all 4 days, but I was only really set up for the 3 because they're going back and forth, finding out if this gentleman was going to be able to attend the Comic-Con or even if I could get the booth or not.
When I met you, aside from, just especially here in the Northeast, you just don't have the veteran culture as you might have, say, in the Midwest or, I mean, even in Southern California with all the military facilities there. So to talk to you was great, but I got very quickly I got a sense of just how passionate you are with the charitable things that you do, like Toys for Tots. You're very big on that.
Yeah. When I first moved home from when I retired in San Diego and I moved back to New York to be with my family, I was trying to figure out the best way to reintegrate into the community. If you look at a lot of things that veterans do, a lot of veterans will open up a distillery or a brewery, or, they'll get into selling T-shirts or coffee, and I'm like, yeah, those aren't anything that I'm really interested in doing. And so I looked for charities that I could help. One right around the corner from me is the Ronald McDonald House, which also has a Marine connection. One of the founders of that was a Marine. Habitat for Humanity was another one that I volunteered at. I got a little bit of a strange vibe when I went in there because they asked me for a timesheet, and I was like, a timesheet? What are you talking about? And the woman looks at me and goes, "Aren't you here to do community service by a court order?" And I'm like, "No, I just wanted to help out." And she's like, "Oh, sorry," And I'm like, maybe I should have a timesheet, if you think I'm, going to get into trouble or something. And then the Marine Corps Reserve Unit here, Fox 225, I talked to them and I, got in contact with the gunny that was there in charge of the Toys for Tots program. And they really didn't need too much help. And so, I really didn't do too much. And then 2 years later, 3 years later, the unit was moved out of New York. And the gunny contacted me and said, "Hey, we need you to come and help out, get in uniform." And I was like, "Yeah, I can help out, but you don't want me in uniform." And I may have said this to you at the Comic-Con. I was law enforcement in the Marine Corps. I was a drill instructor in the Marine Corps, and so it was going to be knife hands and handcuffs, and I was going to scare all the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "Oh, it can't be that bad." And I'm like, "Yeah, dude, it's I really wasn't a happy-go-lucky kind of guy." And so I did an event with them. It was 2 days. We were handing out toys, and I, no joke, scared the kids for 2 days. They would run away from me when I showed up.
You had the
And
beard at the time?
no beard. My hair was probably about the
All
length
right.
it is now. It was a little bit
Okay.
darker. But I was just in regular clothes, and so, I was like, this isn't going to work. I'm still scaring the kids, even though I'm trying not to, and I'm not in uniform. And so I talked to a friend of mine online through social media. They introduced me to the original Gunny Claws online on Facebook, and I was like, "Oh man, that'd be great. I could do that." But the uniform belongs to the Drum and Bugle Corps for the Commandant, and it's like I was never in the unit. I'm never gonna get it. And they're like,
Yeah.
"Well, I'll just give you mine." And so,
Oh wow.
I'm like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah, they were a trumpet player in the Drum and Bugle Corps." And I'm like, "Oh, great." And so, lo and behold, I become Gunny Claws, and I'm having fun every day now.
It's a good gimmick, and I'm not trying to, I hope I'm not limiting it because um, it brings awareness to who you are and to your history, and you have a very uh, robust history with the Marine Corps. You served from, I believe, 1986 to 2007, right? 21 years.
21 years. Yep.
You retired. You were military police. You were a criminal investigator, and you also went back and you taught as an instructor, military Marines who wanted to become military police, right?
Yep. And I was also a drill instructor, so
Yeah,
I,
the drill instructor.
I am
Right.
authorized to
Yes.
wear the campaign cover.
Yeah. And there's going to be a link down below from that interview you did on that podcast that I think is so entertaining and just so informative. We've been to some of the same places. I mean, you did 21 years. Make no mistake about it. I joined at 28. I did 5 years active and 2 in the reserve. So very different careers. I was a Navy hospital corpsman. 3 out of 4 of my commands were Marine commands. But we actually occupy. I remember a Marine sergeant telling me, he's like, "There's 3 people you don't mess with, Doc, as a Marine. You don't mess with the doc, you don't mess with the cookie, and you don't mess with the MP."
Yep.
So you and I occupied 2 of those 3 occupations. But it was nice hearing you talk. Oceanside, Camp Pendleton, the warm place in my heart, in that whole area. But I wanted to ask you. You were an orphan.
Right.
I said, from how did that shape you? Because I mean, you were with the family. You obviously knew that you were an orphan. I would imagine this kind of created like a duplicitous way of living, where you're where you belong, but you're from somewhere else. Did you grow up that way? Did you feel like you fully belonged? What does that do to somebody?
It affects everybody differently. One of the strange things that I've found is that several of my friends were also adopted, you know,
Oh,
and so I was like, I think back on it, and I'm like, well, that's pretty strange. It's not something that you introduce yourself as off as first thing you say to somebody is you were
you didn't
adopted.
lead with that. That just happened to happen.
It just happened to happen,
Just
um,
happened to happen.
and
Yeah.
so then being adopted by the family that I was with, they were both doctors, and so I learned a little bit about medicine. And whenever I talk to anybody who's in the medical field, I always joke I know enough about medicine to be dangerous.
Yeah.
And so I understood the difference between nature and nurture. And so some of the things that are in my life that I did, I can see because of the influence of the family that raised me. And then there's other things that I do that, having found my biological mother and her children, there are certain things in my life that were in my nature. So I have a younger half brother who was in the Air Force. Both of her husbands were Navy. Her father was in the Army Air Corps during World War II. So the military was a strong side of my nature. Then my nurture, my father and my mother having been from Europe, the family from Denmark and Sweden. I didn't play baseball or football. I played soccer because that was more of a thing that my family there would have been more interested in doing. But then once again I find my biological family, and I find out that my siblings all played soccer also. So where did that come from? Was that actually my
Yeah.
nature, or was that my nurture?
It's like those twin stories where the twins
Yes,
don't know each other. And
yes.
it's like their wives have the same names and they chose the same career paths and they're that is yeah, and there's a lot about that we just don't know in science just
Yeah.
how much is genetics, how much is choice.
So that was one of the things, and you know, as a kid, I was very aware of it. Uh, I joked that I was a cuckoo bird. If you know uh, the cuckoo bird, it's not just in a clock; it's an actual bird,
Yeah.
and they will lay their eggs in the nest of another bird. The
Oh, I didn't know that.
the cuckoo bird egg has a shorter gestation period, and so it uh, breaks out first, hatches first, and then gets rid of what other eggs are in there. So it's the only bird in the nest that family then takes care of. And so,
That's crazy.
yeah, it is. And, so it's things that you think about, or at least I thought about, growing up as a kid, being adopted and not knowing my family at the time. And now, having found my family, a lot of that's explained.
You were growing up, and again referring to another video that I saw you in. It seemed like you were sort of a rebel growing up. Would you say, like not exactly a rule follower? And you kind of this is one of the things I learned because I got in at 28, so I was already edging toward 30, and I guess I had misconceptions about just what military people were like. And when I joined late, one of my concerns was I was somebody who didn't follow the rules very easily. But I was stunned when I actually enlisted and I started meeting people, just how many people were like that. And it wasn't so much that they weren't people who could follow rules. They were young men who were looking for rules worth following.
Yeah.
And looking for something greater than themselves and looking for something that, yeah, there's a lot of stuff within the military doesn't make sense or you don't agree with it. But overall, everything, and we'll limit to the Marine Corps, uh, everything serves a purpose. Everything is geared towards strength. Everything is designed to protect you. And I think most Marines, military personnel in general, will surrender to that because that's exactly something that they feel is worth following. And the military, from my experience, actually builds up your individuality. No question. but just teaches you when to put it on the shelf for the greater good. And I think it says something positive about most people in general. Like they're not wayward. They're not, it's not that they can't follow anything or don't have to focus. It's just that they're looking for something worth following, worth believing in. And I was really stunned to meet so many people who they tell you about their backgrounds, and it's like, I'm like, how do you wind up here? People who are, they're getting promoted, they're doing the right thing, they sacrifice themselves, but man, like between the age of maybe 20 and 24 or 16 and to 20 or whatever age they were when they were becoming young men and weren't enlisted at that time, they were just doing whatever they wanted. They weren't following any rules. That was stunning to me, to meet people like that.
Yeah.
And
I think Adam Driver says it the best in one of his interviews. He was a misfit, and he was looking, to find someplace to fit in, and regular society wasn't it. And he found that niche in the Marine Corps.
it's ironic too. It really is. It's just that there's somebody who could not be told anything as a civilian, enlisting in the Marine Corps and just totally giving themselves to it. And I find the Marine Corps is different than every other branch and department in that it really is. You have like the Corps and then you have Marines. And the Corps is like this pulp, right? It's like the ideal of how you're supposed to behave, and then it, like, you're being in the Navy, the Navy has its rules, it has, its core values, honor, courage, and commitment, and you have your higher enlisted and officers who try to instill this in your leadership. But the Corps, it's like there really is this other thing, like this almost spiritual thing called the Corps. And you see it's like sometimes it's your friend, sometimes it's not your friend. It's just this thing that it demands a lot from you, and a lot of Marines they really work hard to live up to this thing called the Corps. And it's timeless, it's grounded in tradition, it's people have bled for this thing. It really is like this other thing within the Marine Corps that I don't see anywhere else. Is that something that you kind of felt when you were in?
Yeah. When I joined the Marine Corps, we all have to take the ASVAB, and we all have to, figure out what tests through that test, what MOSs were going to be offered, what jobs were going to be offered in whatever branches. And, I scored rather well. So I talked to the other branches, the Navy, they saw my scores, and so they offered me to run the nukes.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
which means you scored pretty damn high.
Yeah, I'm smart.
Let's not be too humble. That's like you probably scored higher than nearly anybody to be offered a nuke position.
And
or nuke track.
I'm smart, but the thing is, I also know I'm not that smart. And so as the recruiter's talking to me, he goes, "Yeah, you can run nukes," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not going to live in a submarine." It's not that I don't mind being in a submarine and in an enclosed space. It's just that I'm tall, and I don't want to be bending over all the time. I don't want to be able to not fit in a rack, all these things. And the recruiter's like, "Oh, but we have three." At the time, we had 3 aircraft carriers that were nukes, and I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm not going to graduate 1, 2, or 3 in my class, so I'm going to be stuck in a submarine." And he's just like, "Okay, you're smart and you've got common sense, And so, I got done talking to him. I went over to the Army side, and the Army has a program where if you got the good scores, you can become a helicopter pilot through the Warrant Officer program. And because I had been interested in
they offer you a Warrant Officer track, huh?
Yeah.
That's big.
Yep.
That's a big deal.
And, having been interested in the military, I knew that at the time to be a pilot, especially in a helicopter, I had to be right eye dominant because the scope that you use to see everything goes over your left eye. And if you're left eye dominant, that's what you see, and you don't see the ground, and bad things can happen. and I knew that I was left eye dominant, and that wasn't going to be an option for me. And the recruiter didn't even know that. And I'm like, yeah, okay, dude, I'm going to see you later. I don't remember what the Air Force offered. Back then, the Coast Guard was Department of Transportation, and the Space Force didn't exist yet.
Non-existent, right? Yeah.
Went over to the Marine side, talked to the recruiter there. They basically said, whatever job you want to have, you can have. And at the time, I thought that I would join the Marines, get some training in law enforcement, and get out and be a state trooper or local police officer.
Yeah, which is so smart to do that.
Yep.
I knew I was going to become a nurse. It kind of occurred to me later in life, obviously, like 27, 28. And so corpsman made sense. My dad was in the Air Force for an enlistment. I actually went to be a Air Force corpsman, and I was 27 and going on 28, and you couldn't be over 27 to enlist in the Air Force. But it turned out to be like the greatest thing, because I totally loved becoming a Navy hospital corpsman. But I remember around week 9 or 10 in boot camp, this senior chief came in, and he called all the corpsmen over, and he sat with us. And this is 2009, and he says to us, don't let this Navy shit get in your head. You're a corpsman. You're going with the Marine Corps. So I graduated boot camp. I went to A school, learned how to become basics on becoming a corpsman. I think I scored like 7th or 8th in my class, so I had the last orders for California. I didn't even care what it was. I think it said Naval Hospital Camp Pendleton, right? I didn't know anything, but it turned out to be the School of Infantry. So when they picked me up, they were like, well, you're coming from A school. You never went to field medical training. You're not even certified to be in the field. And I was like, I guess I should go to the hospital, right? And they're like, no.
Yeah.
we need field corpsmen, so we'll take you, and we'll get you in field medical training, and we'll get you in the field. And at the time, I'm like, I had no idea what any of that really means. I was very naive. But during A school, I had HM2 Roddy. He had deployed several times with the Marines. He was a Casevac corpsman in Iraq. He was a big influence. He was like Greenside corpsman all the way, and I wanted to be very much like him. So I kind of gave myself into it, and it was just amazing. I did like 60-something days at the clinic there in Camp Pendleton, and went to field medical training for 2 months. And when I got back, I was able to be a field corpsman, for the School of Infantry West, which was really unique, because I was with Infantry Training Battalion and Advanced Infantry Training, where, for those who might be watching that don't understand, boot camp basically teaches you how to go, yes sir, ma'am. Teaches you the ranks, teaches you how to walk and talk like you're in the military. But the School of Infantry is where you learn how to, learn the basics of your combat skills. Or for those who aren't infantrymen, who are going to go on, they have MCT, which is military combat training, which again, every Marine a rifleman, so they're going to make sure everyone's a rifleman when they leave and before they go off to whatever else they're going to train for. And I mean, it was just, I pretty much shot every weapon in the Marine Corps. I mean, you had certain weeks where, sure, you're doing a 5K on a Monday and a 20K on a Wednesday and a 15K on a Thursday for different companies, but then you're doing the 50 cals, you're doing the grenade range, and you're doing it from, not instructor status, but you're with the instructors, so there's like 30, 40 grenades left. On a Friday, people want to go home early, they're not going to wait for these things to be collected. It could be several hours. They want to go home. So it's like, hey doc, you want to learn how to throw a grenade? We got 40 of them we need to get rid of. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, my first duty station, I requested overseas from my MOS school, my MOS training, and I went to 3rd FSG. It's now 3rd MLG on Okinawa. And our battalion once a week would send Marines up to Camp Hansen, where the infantry was, to learn how to fire all the heavy weapons and crew served weapons, and like you said, throw hand grenades and everything. And
fire SMARs, all that. It was
and
amazing.
and so, instead of sitting back, on Camp Kinzer, cleaning or, you know, PMing a vehicle or whatever, I always volunteered to go up for the training. And, the grunts up there, was one of the companies got tasked with doing the training. They were looking at us, like, what are these pogues doing here? They're worthless. But every week they'd see me, and, finally they're like, dude, what are you doing here? And I'm like, well, I can sit back, down in Kinzer and do nothing, or I can come up here and learn what I'm supposed to know. And so, back then, it was the old M60 machine gun, and everybody else is firing it from the tripod and the T&E, and I've got the old 60, and I'm a big guy, so I'm holding it, and I'm shooting it from the hip, and I'm shooting it from the shoulder, and I'm getting to move and do things that nobody else can do. And everybody's like, why does he get to do that? And they're like, he's been here 6 weeks in a row. He's got more time behind the trigger than a lot of gunners got. So
it was like you talk about the core, like the pulp. When you're the School of Infantry West, it's like they're obviously exuding to the young Marines, just the purest form of Marines. Like you're teaching them the absolute highest standard of what they expect them to function as. So especially when it's your first duty station as a corpsman, you're witnessing this. You're working with the sergeants. I want to say sergeant, but people who are people may not understand that's how we pronounce it. But they might be like, "What does he know how to say sergeant?" But I'll never say sarge. Never call him a Marine sergeant. Sarge. We know that. I learned that once going to Camp Pendleton. also going to a Marine chow hall in my PT gear. That just doesn't fly. But you're seeing the highest absolute standard, and at one point in 2010, with the way the Afghan and Iraq were going, they were estimating that 4 people for every training company were not going to make it. So it became like the leadership were like, don't just go there and patch up boo-boos or do triage, because it's very important to know who has pneumonia versus a URI, because pneumonia needs to go back to the clinic and they need antibiotics because they can infect the whole company, and a URI you could treat in the field, and to know exactly, hey, did someone have a stress fracture? You need to know this, or it can get worse. And it was really important, and you really had to learn your skills well, because the worst thing to do is take a Marine out of training, and so you really had to understand triage and really keeping people healthy in the field, and keeping them getting their medication if they need it, or repacking that cellulitis in the field, and keeping it clean, and responding to heat stroke or heat exhaustion, all that stuff. But sorry, my table's moving. But at the same time, I took it upon myself to there's corpsman aid, there's buddy aid, and there's self aid. Let's make these young Marines as able as they can to take care of themselves, to recognize something, and to take care of their fellow Marine. And when I was in infantry training battalion, ITB, that was something I took very seriously. Young Marines, they come for you for everything, and seasoned Marines, they don't come to you at all. So it was that battle with the older Marines, like, hey, let me see this, what's going on here, so
my best one was when I was an instructor at Fort Leonard Wood with the Army for 3 years. They would do an annual hike out in the civilian town with civilians. It was like 2-3 miles. It was the world's slowest pace. It was just dog and pony show. And I got done, and since it was so slow, I was actually hurting because we'd gone so slow. And so I go into the Army, and they have medics. They don't have corpsmen. And there's this young PFC in the Army standing there, and I go, yeah, I need some Motrin. And they're like, oh, okay, hold on a second. They get it out, and they look at me and they're like, have you eaten yet? And I'm like, no. Oh, I can't give this to you. And I'm like, listen, give me this stupid Motrin, I'll take care of it. right? And so they open it up and they pop out two 200 milligram Motrins. And I looked at them and I'm like, what are you doing? And they're like, well, that's all I can give you without, a prescription from a doctor. And I'm like, I need two 800 milligrams. I'm not, I'm not a trainee. Give me what I need. And all of a sudden, I hear somebody come in the back of the tent, and they come up and they're like, hold on a second, let me help out. And the guy looks at me and goes, oh, hold on a second, Gunnery Sergeant. And he goes in the back and he comes out and he's got a bottle of, 800 milligrams, and he just throws me the bottle and he's like, here you go. And the other guy's like, you can't do that. He goes, you can't do that. And he goes, you don't understand. He's a Marine gunnery sergeant and he eats 800 milligram Motrin, like Tic Tacs.
Yeah. I had a sergeant instructor in a school of infantry, and he was, every time we started, because I was attached to Echo Company and more than anybody else, and every time I showed up, he was like, Doc, I need my 1600. And at first I'm like, you shouldn't have more than 800 at a time, Sergeant. He's like, Doc, give me my 1600. I was like, here you go. I made sure I carried extra Motrin. Yeah. Yeah, man, those are great times. The stories too. At the time of the School of Infantry in 2010, every instructor was a combat vet. I mean, just because you'd have the young, the students just doing their thing or whatever, and you're just hanging back. You're always with somebody, and the stories. I mean, and the humor. I mean, nobody can duplicate. Nobody could duplicate the Marine humor. Just like, obviously the closest thing I ever saw was Full Metal Jacket. In terms of how these instructors can be.
I was a student at an Army course, and I'm surrounded by soldiers, and we're sitting in the classroom, and we're going through the training cycle, and something comes up in the PowerPoint, and I say an offhand remark about it, and everybody just stops and looks at me, and the instructor looks at me and he's like, go see the Marine instructor. Like I'm being sent to see the principal. And I'm like, what did I say? I don't even know what was wrong. And so I go back there and I see the Marine instructor, and he's like, says something about the joke I said. He's like, hey man, these guys, they got thin skin, they don't understand our humor.
Yeah.
Just watch what you're saying. And then he finishes it with, oh, I hear you're going out to St. Louis this weekend. And I'm like, yeah. Hey, you need to go to this club and this club if you're heading out. And I'm like, roger that, thanks. So I go back into class, and, lunchtime, we're all sitting there, having lunch, and all the soldiers are like, so what happened? What happened? And I'm like, oh, I got told what strip club to go to in St. Louis. And they're just like, huh? You didn't get in trouble? And I'm like, no.
Yeah, I remember a conference we had to do at Camp Pendleton because with the blue side, with the actual Navy hospital side, and all the corpsmen from the Marine side of base. Again, I'm speaking in terms so most people can understand where Camp Pendleton is. It's sort of like halved. You got the Marine side and the Navy side, and we're on the Navy side, and a lot of the Green Side corpsmen, whether from the training command that I'm at or other units, we're at this corpsman course for the day, and it ends with this this nice Navy nurse, and she's philosophizing, and she ends it with and remember at the end of the day, all about saving lives, and there must have been like 7 or 8. Greenside corpsman there, and as soon as she said that, in unison, we all said, "Kill!" Just like, and I just love the culture that comes with it, and getting down to brass tacks, getting done what needs to get done,
and that's
something
That's one of the things I try to keep with the Gunny Claws is trying to keep some of that humor. I spoke to you at the Comic-Con. Some of them translate better than others. Stack presence, keeps the Marine idea there. The other one is the Marine Corps in World War II with the Raiders use the term gung ho, which is Chinese for work together, representing Santa Claus and
That's
Christmas.
what it meant in Chinese, gung ho. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was from the Raiders, Carlson's Raiders.
Oh,
Yep,
all right. I didn't know it meant work together.
yep. And so, trying to keep that history and that camaraderie and the Marine side with the gunny clause, I now say gung ho ho.
Yeah, no, that's. I was actually gonna say that as soon as you signed on, but I was like, because I saw that in the video. You had mentioned that in the video that I watched, and one of the things I find remarkable is, like, I can meet somebody a veteran, and you could become like you just have each other's backs. It just happens like this, and I can't even explain how it's possible. It's like you almost step back. You're like, how is this possible that you can have like a lifelong buddy, and you just met each other, and suddenly just like this mixing of histories and experiences, and I mean, it can happen in a day. You're just boys, and but as a civilian, the amount of work it takes to make friends, to keep those friendships going. Even if they're strong friendships, they might not be like, hey, my house got knocked down from whatever is happening. Can I stay at your place for a few days? No, we're not that good of friends. So it's remarkable and also sad, because you leave a duty station. I mean, thank God for social media in terms of that, because you can keep in contact a lot better. But it is kind of disheartening to have been so close to so many people, and to just you get out and you don't really see them anymore. Or you're a civilian. You touched it on the video, like people thank you for your service, but they don't really account for your experience on the job. I know as an ER nurse, people get caught up in how busy the day is, and I'm just like, this is nothing. this is not stress.
Yeah.
Or somebody is a charge nurse for the day, and it's like, I know I could do the job, but I know I'd also never be asked for it. As somebody who just does contracts and is sort of in and out. But it never really. I mean, I got out of the military to go to nursing school, and suddenly I'm in anatomy 101. I had to go through 4 years to get that degree, and much of it was just a waste. And even now as a nurse, as a corpsman, I could crike somebody. I was doing much more advanced triage. I was prescribing certain medications. There was one time even in Africa where I was the acting medical officer, because the doctor didn't come with us, and I had to coordinate with a doctor at a clinic. He was a Navy doctor who was part of the first wave to go into Iraq, who was in a shock trauma platoon, and only had the fondest memories of Marines, because I was deployed with a Marine unit at the time, who would be my signature guy, whether I needed to order glasses for somebody or to get them medication, like doing me a favor. But then again, as a nurse, like I could never touch some of those responsibilities. And I'm making more money, but just the level of responsibility or the feeling of purposeful activity is just, I think, way down by comparison. And I can see how
it's sad that
yeah.
there, and it's not just the training, but it's actually like gatekeeping for the people that have higher degrees. They don't want people below them to be that proficient and be able to do things. They want to be in charge, and unfortunately, there are certain jobs in the civilian world, and that that degree means everything, and they think that they walk on water basically because they've got this degree.
Yes.
And it's like, dude, it's like I said, my parents were doctors. So when I go in and talk to a doctor and they start using medical terms and trying to impress me and convince me that, whatever's in my best interest because they're the doctor, I just look at them and I'm like, no, dude, I'm not doing that. This is what we're doing. And they're like, what do you mean? And I go, because that's BS, and it really annoys me that
Yeah, I'm sure
that
they
that,
don't like that.
that's the way
They
things
don't
are.
hear
Yeah.
that. On my last shift, there was a physician, great guy, but he's teaching at a conference late in the spring in New York for geared toward first responders to teach, emergency medicine, from tourniquets to all that stuff. And he didn't know I was a corpsman. I started talking about because I've done my fair share of being an instructor in that capacity, and you could tell like right away I just started getting pumped up talking about tourniquet application and how if you don't have a tourniquet, you are the tourniquet. You put your leg in there, you stop that bleeding, you whip it out. You're not taking a knee, going in your backpack. And I was just getting so passionate about it for like 60 seconds, and I could tell. You could just see like in his eyes, like, wow, this guy is really knows what he's talking about. And because when we learn, as a corpsman, and Marines know a lot about medicine, or at least emergency medicine. You have combat lifesavers courses that they take, and most experienced Marines. I mean, I don't think anybody's more proficient in putting on a tourniquet than a Marine, even next to a corpsman. I mean, just like certain things that Marines know how to do to rescue their buddy is just like stellar. But when we learn it, it's very practical. Like before deployment, I go to Pig Lab to learn what arterial bleeding really feels like, and to see on a it's a sedated pig with a civilian standby and for anyone who has a problem with that, I always say that the pigs used in that Pig Lab had better lives than any pig that you eat on a hospital deployment. I mean, they're sedated, they're fed natural food, they have civilian standbys with military to make sure that everything is absolutely being done humanely. But you're learning these skills, you're going over again, how to crike and how to do this, but you're going to be deployed in 2 weeks. You may have to do this on someone else. When I'm teaching Marines buddy aid and self aid, it's not just for them, because I know that statistically speaking at the time, if you have a Marine in combat who is injured and you stabilize them in the field, they have a 90% survival probability. A corpsman in the field, because they're the corpsman, their survival probability is 55%. So you don't want to be that guy on Saving Private Ryan, Tom Hanks, like, Doc, tell us what to do. You want to make sure everyone's trained,
Yep.
because you might need it eminently. It's a very intimate way to learn how to perform.
So before we deployed, there's it used to be a TV show company called Stu Stegall Productions, and they did a TV show called Renegade, Pensacola, Wings of Gold, another police show, I can't remember what it was. It was Silk Stockings, and they saw a need for realistic training. And when I first joined, they'd have a person sitting there with a moulage, it was a piece of rubber sitting on their leg, saying that they had a wound on their leg, or there would be a piece of rubber sitting on their chest that, and the little note would say sucking chest wound, and all these things. And it was so fake that, you couldn't really use the training well. And so this company took it over, and they actually used people from the countries that we were going to go to deploy to be role players for the local inhabitants. They used veterans who had been in combat and lost a limb to role play.
Yeah, that's similar.
To role play somebody who was injured and was lost a leg and had an arterial bleed and things like that. And it was so more immersive and so more realistic that the training was 10 times better than when I first joined compared to the training that they can get now.
Right. Yeah, because you were, before 2001, from what I heard, because I wasn't obviously I heard that the medical was still in the Vietnam War era in terms of engaging people who.
Well, one of the things that the military did, because they were losing that expertise in treating wounds, they were actually sending doctors, military doctors, to hotspots like LA, Chicago, and Miami, so that these doctors would work in a trauma unit specifically on gunshot wounds and stabbings and stuff, so they could see how, important it was to get certain things done quickly. And
Yeah, that was actually a thing at Camp Pendleton. I tried to get to the. You could spend like I forgot how long it was, maybe 2 weeks. You can go to like an LA trauma ward
yeah,
to get skills, which is like anytime you can leave and then go somewhere for 2 weeks and stay in a hotel is fabulous. But yeah, that was like a thing like you can to try to apply for and to do.
and one of the things, since I was in law enforcement, I was able to do for my Marines was take them to see an autopsy.
Okay.
And I actually had 3 of my Marines have to leave during the procedure because they got sick. And, I'm like, okay, write those names down, because if something happens and we have to take care of somebody, they may have a problem and they may need to see the chaplain or the psychiatrist when we get back. And then I had one female Marine, she was there helping out the medical examiner, taking out the organs, weighing the organs, and, knee deep in it. And,
Wow.
so she got the first responder kit, the additional training for the medical side, because I knew she could handle it.
Yeah, that's actually. I never got to see an actual autopsy. I've got my fair share of cadavers, but yeah, that would be something, because that really that's something on my bucket list to see, just for learning purposes, just to see what's done. It's always good to have eyes on organs, what they actually look like. It's part of the pig lab where at one point the pig was kept alive and they took the chest plate off and they showed you what a punctured lung looks like by actually doing it. And that muscle memory is incredible. Like knowing what arterial blood feels like in my hand in the dark.
Yeah.
And the smell of it. I mean, it's just such good training. Yeah,
The
see that.
the first autopsy I went to, that was rough. I mean, we had to use the Vicks Vapor Rub underneath the nose.
Really?
Yeah. And as it started, I remembered, there used to be a TV show on called Quincy, and he was a medical examiner, and he starts the autopsy, he starts the procedure, and the scene is all of the students are passing out and leaving the room, and when he finishes with the autopsy, he's the only one left. And this autopsy is going that way. It was all law enforcement, civilian law enforcement, except for myself as a Marine. And everybody left the examining room because it was, that bad. It was that difficult to be there and observe what was going on. And, we get done, 2 medical examiners and myself, and we're walking out. And these guys are talking about what they're going to have for lunch. Like nothing. And I'm sitting there, barely made it through. I'm like, geez. That's the last thing I'm thinking about is food right now.
Yeah, I was in a code, and we have this device called a Lucas. It's basically a machine that does CPR, and I don't think it was functioning correctly, or whatever reason. I was basically doing CPR with another. This guy was a male nursing assistant, and I could do CPR for a long time and still hit the 2.5 inches, and I think a couple of rounds went by. I was still feeling good about it. He's like, Glenn, do you want to switch out? I'm like, this is actually a great tricep workout. Which, I mean, things are said, but that's just that's one of the reasons I do like the medical field. That there is, I wouldn't call that humor at the time, but things are said. It is a job. It is a job. It takes a big toll out of you, but yeah, it's. I was feeling it in my triceps. I was still, as long as I was hitting the 2.5 inches in depth, and the care was not compromised, I wanted to keep going a couple more rounds. It was a good exercise. But I mean, that's those are some things are said. Sometimes there are a few chuckles even in a code. Everything is being done the way it needs to be done, but people are human.
Yep.
I wanted to talk to you about you're a combat vet. You served in Iraq. I'm not a combat
Hold
vet.
up.
Oh,
You're kind of cute. You remind me of Santa Claus.
I didn't mean to do this.
On your lap.
So
yeah, no problem. No problem.
I got to cut you off. All right.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to answer that. Sorry.
No, it's okay. No, again, we're not live, but yeah. Is everything going in the direction you're fine with? Or
Oh, yeah,
kinda-
yeah. Yep.
I'm kind of off. I wanted to go off the cuff with talking with you. I didn't
So
wanna disrespect you.
back to combat vet, right?
Yeah, yeah. So you're a combat vet. You served in Iraq. I am not a combat vet. I've served in hostile areas where there was Taliban, and I did one trap mission, but I wanted to talk to you because sometimes I feel like sometimes we get caught up in who's a combat vet, who's not a combat vet. One thing the Marine Corps does when they say that they do this, and they really do it. They train like how they fight. And even when I was at Camp Pendleton, there was an instructor who drowned in the pool. There was a helicopter that went down. There was a truck that went off a cliff. A buddy of mine was on the 11th MEU, and he was in Djibouti, Africa, where I actually was 2 years later, doing a live fire drill. Unfortunately, somebody had put a reflective something that reflected in the dark. I think it was basically the same color as the targets, and unfortunately, he got shot and killed in that training evolution. It is rigorous. It's a rigorous lifestyle. It's not to be downplayed. There's no it. Combat is its own thing. Obviously, incredible respect to that, but it's not hot and cold. It's not like you're a combat vet, and if you weren't, you were just chilling. Like I always try to explain people what it's like in terms of being in the Marine Corps. Obviously, I'm doing it from a corpsman point of view, but in some cases, I actually have a little bit more of an objective idea about it, or a perception of it. But they train really, really hard. It is not an easy lifestyle, and because sometimes, especially civilians,
So
this always-
that's the
this
thing,
pisses me off. They really try to dismiss. Did you go to combat? And for me, I don't care, but for other people, especially who worked a lot harder than me, who cannot just dip out like docs like to dip out sometimes, but we're there, and in the field, 2 weeks. It could be Camp Pendleton, it could be somewhere else, it could be 29 Palms, who are training. I mean, I remember we were doing training in Africa, and the first week I lost 10 pounds, and it was rigorous. And I remember because South Sudan at the time was having a civil war, and we were supposed to go all month long. We slept with our weapons. We had to have somebody do a watch because we couldn't put them in the. We had to have them so we had easy access to them. And in the middle of the night, we're being woken up. We're saying we're going to go. We're going to go. We're going to the airstrip, waiting for transport. Helicopters are on, and we're not going. We're not going. Go back to sleep. Go back to sleep. The next day, training. You go back to where you're staying. You try to get some sleep. Suddenly you're woken up again in the middle of the night. You get your weapon. You're putting on your paint, your face paint. You get your gear. You're waiting again. For the bird. And we're not going. We're not going. It's still a very stressful existence, and it's still a lot of hard work. I don't think people can really understand what that lifestyle is like.
So, in my 20 odd years, I got ready to go to combat several times. One time we're deployed to Korea. We're up by the DMZ, a little area called Unchan. And, every time the UN forces, the American forces, and South Korean forces would do a training exercise, the North Koreans would do a corresponding training exercise in the North. Well, when they did that, usually it would be the same number of people. So if we had 1,000, they'd have 1,000. If we had 2,000, they'd have 2,000. And, it was this sort of understanding, this gentleman's agreement between both sides that's how it would go. Well, we're sitting there and we set up for this bear hunt. And we're there and we're deployed and we've got, our 1,000 guys or so. And the intelligence comes back and says, hey, wait a minute. They've got 5,000 guys. They're setting up to have more guys than us, which, intelligence and the higher ups start going, wait a minute, that's not normal. They may be preparing to do something.
Right.
And
right.
so we're sitting there and, we're a FSG, we're a field support group or MLG Marine Logistics Group. And so we've got females in our unit, and this is back in the 80s. And back then females weren't allowed to be in combat, period, at all. And so now our command is going, okay, we're going to have to take all these females out of the jobs that they're in right now. And we're going to have to evacuate them to either someplace further south or even all the way back to Okinawa. And I'm sitting there, as a young Marine going, wait a minute, nothing's even happening. I'm going to lose 3 Marines. We're already shorthanded and we're going to lose 3 people. And so, that was one of the things that annoyed me when I was younger. And, these days people talk about equality and who's allowed in the military and who's not allowed in the military. And, it's like, hey, if somebody wants to do what you and I did, and they want to put their life on the line and they want to serve their country, find them something that they can do. I don't care what it is. If it's counting paper clips or, moving widgets from one spot to another because they want to serve, let them serve. Because that's what we want. We want people to serve that want to serve. And then later on, I was with Division, and, we're sitting there and we're at Camp Pendleton, and Division at Camp Pendleton, there's 3 regiments, 1st Marines, 5th Marines, and 7th Marines. And each one of those regiments rates a platoon of military police. Well, my company, that's supposed to have 3 platoons, has 1 platoon. So whenever 1st Marines goes and does any training and they want their MPs, we all go. 5th Marines does it, we all go. 7th Marines does it, we all go. And so at this one time, 7th Marines were preparing to go into Southwest Asia. I can't remember if it was Iran or Iraq or, wherever. And so we're staging our gear and we're trying to get it ready to go to Iraq, Southwest Asia. And then North Korea starts acting funny. So the 5th Marines, they're tasked with going there and they want their platoon. So now we're staging gear to go to the cold weather Korea or the hot weather desert, and we don't know which one we're going to go to. And, both of those units wanted to check our equipment and check us out to make sure that we're ready for this and that. And, it's like we're juggling everything, trying to get everything together. We're sending off our heavy weapons to be checked out by their armorers to make sure that they're combat ready. And one unit comes back and goes, yeah, none of your weapons can go to combat. They're all junk. The other unit's like, yeah, these weapons are all good to go. We'll load them up on this. And, and we're like, okay, great. And we got so far as loading everything up, driving our Humvees out to 29 Palms, and sitting on the runway to be loaded on planes to go. I can't remember if it was Korea or Southwest Asia or wherever, but, we're sitting there and we could see off to the side, we could see the ammo techs sitting on a pile of ammunition ready to break it out and issue it to us, so we could go. And, that was the longest day of my life. I mean, you get there at 0 dark 30, and you're sitting out there on the flight line and you're just waiting and waiting and waiting.
Yep.
And then, it comes down. It's like, oh, go back to Camp Pendleton. We're done.
Yeah. But all of that is stressful. And all of that is, it takes its toll on you. So to dismiss it as, well, it wasn't combat. If that, there's a lot of Marines train how they fight. It could be. It's not. I think Marines actually do this. They're unique in this. So I wrote this down. The War Powers Resolution Act of 1973. So the president basically has 90 days to engage any situation in the world using the military without congressional approval, right?
Right.
And it's the Marine Corps that the president will use.
But that
It's
War Powers Act allows the president to use the Marine Corps without congressional approval at any time, anywhere, for
that's
any
what I
period
mean.
of time.
Yeah, yeah. He doesn't even have to mention it for like I think 48 hours or something. Don't
Yeah.
quote me on that, but that's what makes the Marine Corps so different. I'm speaking from at the time as an outsider, right? I joined the Navy, and you get there and you realize, and now, somebody had told me this, some Marine, instructing this boot Navy guy. Um, it, it's so it changes your mindset when you know as a Marine, president could say we're going somewhere. Anything could pop off at any time, and within like 72 hours, you're there. You're storming the beach, so to speak. Like that changes the way you exist when you know just the president at any time can just send you, and that's something I sensed very strongly, and it does influence the Navy as you know. Marine Corps is the Department of the Navy. Marines might say the men's department, but in terms of linguistics, in terms of being a hospital corpsman who's going with them, it changes your mentality. Like Navy hospital corpsmen say "oorah," Navy says "hooyah," we corpsmen say "oorah." What do Marines say? "Oorah." So there's a very strong relationship there, and you just get a sense of that very quickly. Like we're training for a war that could pop off at any time, and we could be sent to go tomorrow. And I don't think anybody exudes that energy more than a U.S. Marine. I just don't. I don't see that anywhere. It's like you don't have the luxury of knowing that there's going to be a period of time gear up for battle. That it could just happen at a moment's notice.
So when I was an MP and I was in San Diego at the recruit depot working as an MP, the first Gulf War occurred, and a lot of things were happening, but the thing that was the most amazing thing to me is almost every day we would have a person drive up to the gate saying that they had been in the Marine Corps at whatever time in their life. And some of these guys were in their 70s now, and they are driving up to the gate because they want to serve again, and you're just like, wow. And I was a young guy, I'm in my 30s, and I'm looking at this guy, and it looks like he could do it. I'm like, okay.
People like that.
I'm like, all right, let's rock and roll.
Yeah.
And you saw me at the Comic-Con. I'm still the same weight that I was when I was in. I may not be as fast as I was. I may not be able to lift as much as I could when I was in, but I'm still ready.
Yeah, I wish I was at the same weight, probably 25 more. I'm trying to lose it, but I still keep it going. I'm still. Well, I actually talked this in my last podcast with someone I served with. Sometimes it is you're in fight or flight mode a little too much, right? It's still kind of there. It could be a curse, but it can also be a good thing, and I think we all have to deal with that in our own way. But I do find that for me, the green side, for you, Marine Corps, that it does you retain this umbilical cord to the heart of the country, the soul of the country. I feel, and in everything that you do, God forbid you did something half-assed or something that was less than honorable, and then they found out you were also in the Marine Corps, or you served, for me, a Navy hospital corpsman. Like, it would really affect me. It would really feel like a big blemish if I didn't perform, give anything 100%, and they found out, like, oh, you were a hospital corpsman, and you kind of look like a shitbag right now. Like, it would affect me in a deep way, and I find that people, won't say ex-Marines, but people who were in the Marine Corps, they kept those standards. They keep the standard.
Yeah, the men's and women's Navy basketball from Annapolis was just at West Point,
Yeah.
and I have some followers on social media that are from Annapolis, and I was hoping to see them down at the game, so I decided to wear my uniform down at the event, and it's all Army, but
Yeah.
it's the brotherhood is there still. I'm on Army ground. I'm Department of the Navy. I'm a Marine, but I've got football players, that want to take a picture with me because they know who I am and what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So it's really good.
That's what's great about what you do. As I said before, you bring attention to it, and it breaks my heart sometimes. Like when I was on the GI Bill going to nursing school, I met veterans who they used up their GI Bill. They used it up going from major to major, and they're sort of in this limbo, kind of like how I got out, and suddenly I'm in Anatomy 101, like literally 101, and I just wanted to say F off. I hate this, and I find like a lot of veterans, they had all this responsibility, they acquired this skill, zero translates, and they just get exasperated, and they go back to trying to find like this new proverbial platoon or somewhere to belong, and somewhere that recognizes their skill sets. And in this case, like they burn up their GI Bill trying to figure it out, and then they don't even get the degree that they could have gotten, or
Well, I mean, the thing is the colleges give so little credit for what we actually do.
yeah,
I mean, I went
zero.
to, well, I mean, they do give you some, but I mean, other things they don't. It's like I went to the community college. I was 40 years old, and they're like, you got to take personal finance. I'm like, what are you joking? They're like, yeah, everybody's got to take personal finance. And I'm like, you realize in my last command in the Marine Corps, I was in charge of $1 million of equipment and budget. I had 100 Marines that worked for me. I've bought 2 houses. I can't count the number of cars and motorcycles and everything else that I've done over the last 20 years. And you want me to take personal finance? And they're like, well, you can do a CLEP it out. You can do an essay on it. And I'm like, all right, give me a 3x5 card. And they're like, what do you mean? You got to write an essay. And I go, yeah, the essay is going to be United States Marine Corps, 1986 to 2007. Married twice, 2 houses, 2 dogs, so many cars. Here you go. But they wanted more, and I was just like, this is ludicrous. This is ridiculous. That that's their mentality. But they're dealing generally with somebody who's just got out of high school and has no life experience, and the system is set up, and it's because of the computers and the way it's set up now. There's no way around it. You have to fill that block. You have to put something in there, and they only have certain things that they can put into that space. And it's like, it's that's why, like you said, probably some of these guys are sitting there and they're bouncing from one degree to another because they can't find anything that fits, and anything that they've done already that they're interested in, they're not getting any credit for.
When you got out, what made you? I guess you you didn't want to go into law enforcement in any way? Because I know that's why you part of the reason you became an MP.
Well, one of the problems was New York State did not recognize any of my training.
And you're in Albany, by the way. That's where you reside?
Yeah. So,
Okay.
and even some of the training that I got wasn't recognized anymore. So, like, one of the things I had done when I was in the Marine Corps is I become an instructor through the NRA. Now, if I had been a civilian law enforcement officer and I retired, the NRA would allow me to keep my certificates and keep training.
Oh.
But as a Marine, I lost that.
Yeah, that's nuts.
So,
that's
and I'm like,
uncalled for.
and I'm like, what this is BS. And so, if I wanted to be law enforcement in New York State, I would, I don't mind having to go to an academy and learning the rules and regulations, laws and procedures of New York State, because they're going to be different than what I did in the Marine Corps. But to start from zero, and like you said, biology 101, no, this is ridiculous. And so that was one of the things that turned me off. The other thing I saw, today, unfortunately, I I feel that law enforcement is used more to gain revenue than to serve and protect. And I just couldn't see, going out and filling the coffers of the government that's just going to waste money on programs and things that aren't necessary. And, it's like not do what I really should be doing. And that's helping people and serving the community.
Yeah, I get a deep sense of from you that that's something that, the it's cliche, so the looking to the person to your right or to your left, but I get a sense that that's really means a lot to you. That's the most important thing for you. It's not about money. It's not about anything else. It's just fun. Just like Schwarzenegger says, be useful. It's something that really means a lot to you. That's something that 2025 is I want to get more involved. I've already contacted my American Legion because it was like a fast-paced 5-6 years where I graduated, I got married, my wife got pregnant, COVID hit, I'm in the ER in Queens during COVID. On top of that, had bought a house, second kid. The things that kind of, have a grip on things now, more of a grip. So that. People don't realize the American military at every organization in the world in terms of volunteering, nobody tops the United States Armed Forces. I mean, it is a huge part of what we do.
Well, I mean, every year we do the combined federal campaign.
Yeah.
Every charity in the United States that's legitimate asks the military for money, for donations for their charity. And then, realizing how much the military did for charities, the military's now come out with an award, a medal for those that do go out and above, beyond just the combined federal campaign fund and volunteering and doing things in the community.
Yeah. One of the greatest things I did when I was at Camp Pendleton was a weekend. We were just going downtown San Diego, registering all the homeless veterans into the VA system. And there were a couple of Vietnam vets who were homeless for, probably from the 80s onward, who were entitled to full benefits, 100%. Didn't know about it, had never been a part of the system. And you're talking about 20, 25 years, 30 years, just nothing for them. I was in Italy for a year and a half, my only true Blue Side Command and clinic. But we volunteered with the orphans there. One of my favorite things to do. It's just amazing to do something like that. Working with the kids in the Philippines, the preschools that the American Legion over in Subic Bay sponsors, and that stuff is just meant so much to me, and it's something that it's really the only thing I have left that I feel like I could be a part of and serve or things like that. And it's also, as an added bonus, you do meet so many veterans like yourself who are involved, and so there is a chance of camaraderie and meeting people like yourself who want to feel useful and have a purpose and to serve the community.
Yeah, like I said, and some of these organizations, a lot of these charities have been started by service members. Like the big one right near me is the Ronald McDonald House. One of the founders was a Marine, and so that's one of the reasons why I got involved with that one when I first came home.
Yeah, the Ronald McDonald House. I haven't thought about that. I kind of forgot about that. How long have you been involved with them?
I'm not involved with them as much as I used to be. The woman who ran it retired, so my connection, the person I used to work with and knew me, isn't there, and I haven't made that connection with somebody else there the way that that working relationship that we had. So I need to get over there and do more, but it's you look at what needs help, what needs working on in the community, and the Ronald McDonald House right now is pretty well off. They just added a whole new building several years ago. They're well staffed, so it's like, okay, should I go work with them, or should I find something else that needs more help? And so, that's where I'm at.
Do you keep in contact with a lot of people that you served with? Do you have like a lot of buddies?
I just went to Hawaii,
I saw that. Yeah.
and the reason I went
Did
there,
they invite you there, or
yeah,
like how did that go?
yeah.
They
So
did. Yeah.
so the MCCS was looking for the mall Santa, to do a Christmas event at the Marine Corps Exchange, and they're in at the beginning of the year, and they're talking about all the events they want to do, and the civilian is talking to the sergeant major, the base sergeant major, and they're like, yeah, we wish we could get Gunny Claus to come out, but he won't come out, and he's like, who, what? And so they showed the sergeant major my picture instead of the original Gunny Claus from South Carolina,
Okay.
because they were talking about the one from South Carolina, but they showed my picture, and he goes, "Oh, we can get him here. I know him." And they're like, "We've tried several years. We can't get him." And he's like, "Okay, hold on." Picks up his phone and calls me, and I answer the phone. I'm like, "Hey, what's up, Sergeant Major?" He's like, "Hey, what are you doing on December such and such?" And I'm like, "I don't know. What do you need?" "Well, I need you out here." "All right, I'll be there."
That's great.
So that's how I got
Yeah,
out there.
I was in K Bay. I remember that jungle training and everything.
That was my first time in
Yeah.
Hawaii. It was really nice.
Yeah, yeah. They got. I was in Maui as well. And the great beaches over there. It really is like a little oasis. What was I going to say? Hold on one second. Just want to make sure. I had a couple of points. I just want to make sure. Let's see. I won't keep you on too long. I know it's been an hour.
No, I'm good. No worries.
You good?
Yep.
All right. Do you have anything planned in the future, in the near future that you're doing? Anything you're working on?
So like I said, I was just down at West Point for the Army Navy basketball game.
Yeah.
I was able to talk to our local county veterans organization, and they actually got a bus to take veterans down to watch the game, which was really good. Because they otherwise nobody would go down there, nobody'd see the game, and so that was good. I'm looking at going once again down to DC for Memorial Day weekend. There used to be an event there called Rolling Thunder, and it's now called Rolling to Remember. Rolling Thunder was to account for the POWs and MIAs from Vietnam. And Rolling Thunder has now been taken over by AMVETS. And on top of that mission, they've added the 22 a day. Being a veteran and being in the medical field, you're probably aware of that the VA claims or is willing to admit that 22 veterans commit suicide a day. And
Yes.
so
And veterans are 72% more likely to commit suicide than people who didn't serve.
yeah. And so, that's one of the things that, being who I am, that's something that I feel I can help. In fact, when I was in Hawaii, I was in the exchange, and between one of my duties as being the mall Santa, I was walking around looking at uniform items because I don't get to go to a Marine Corps exchange very often.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
if I need something, perfect time to pick something up. And I saw a young Marine, stressed out, trying to figure out something, about his uniform. He needed to buy something, So I stopped and I talked to him for a minute or two. And, for me, it was just interacting with a young Marine. And so I get back to, my duties, and I'm enjoying the rest of my day. The next day I'm on social media and I get a message from a complete stranger, and at first I was like, I don't know who this is. I'm not even going to look at it. It's probably some kind of spam. And it turns out to be that Marine's uncle. And he found me on social media because his nephew was in the exchange buying a uniform item because he had to go home for a funeral of one of his buddies. And so, I didn't know that, but he goes, you're talking to him, you're taking the time to talk to him and help him out, you know, really helped him out, really made his day, and allowed him to get what he needed done and get out of there, you know, with some sanity.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure you gave him. I experienced that a few times. Yeah, you get. It just feels. You just feel recognized. I'm sure. You know, in his world, it's all, you know, it's what his rank is. He's new. He's a boot. He's this and that. And he talks to this guy like you, who's retired and you know, did his duty and was served honorably. Who's recognizing him as a Marine, a human being. Doesn't matter what his rank is. Just, hey, you're in the Corps. This is who you are. We're brothers. I'm sure he really appreciated that.
Yep.
That kind of connection. Oh, I had something. What was I gonna go? Oh man, I just forgot my thought.
That's why you got to have a pen and write those things down.
I know. I don't want to be like this the whole time. Again, I'm like learning.
No. I mean,
yeah, it's a play too.
I mean, the thing is, you know, that's the great thing about being recorded. You could cut that part out where you stop, you know. So.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I want to ask. So, two questions. First, I'll lead with what's the thing you miss about the Marine Corps the most? Being active duty in the Marine Corps.
Oh, geez. I mean, there is a more there.
Be broad.
No. There is more of a purpose to your life when you're in the military. You're a part of something bigger. Everybody's going towards a certain goal. You know, whether it's, you know, this week we got to get this done, or if it's this month, you know, by the end of the month we have to have that done, or, you know, even in 5 years we're going to be at this spot.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's one of the things that you miss. You know, I've had civilian jobs before and after the Marine Corps, and you go in and it's Groundhog Day. And, you know, it's like nobody's looking forward, you know, hey, we need to improve this. We need to get better here. We need to, you know, do this or that. It's, you know, they show up and even, and so often they don't show up, you know, and they don't think that that's an issue, that's a problem. They don't realize how much stress and how much extra work that they put onto somebody else because they don't show up.
Yeah. The military, if you are motivated, it will reward hard work. If you are determined to pick up rank, if you are determined to pick up responsibility, and you put in the work, you will get it. At some point, it will happen. That's at least my experience, for the most part.
Yep.
And that's not a guarantee in the civilian sector. There's a lot of a lot of reasons people get promoted, and not much of it has nothing to do with how good they are. What's something you don't miss? You had touched upon 29 Palms, waiting to go somewhere and then being told to go back. I definitely don't miss taking my rifle. Well, hold on one second. Let me redo that. I don't miss taking my rifle out of the armory, lining up at 4 a.m. To be transported somewhere, and we don't leave until 2 p.m. I don't miss days like that. That is like hell on earth. You're just waiting in one spot from 4 a.m. till 2 p.m. when you told the transpo was at 8 a.m. Or 5 a.m. I don't miss those days, but what's something you definitely don't miss?
So, I mean, as much as you hate that at the time, it does prepare you for a lot of things that you have to deal with in the civilian world and in the military.
Yeah, it does.
You know, and so when people, when people these days are complaining about, their Uber was a minute late or 5 minutes late, or, this food that I got from, this restaurant isn't what, is on the billboard, what it's not advertised as, I just look at people and I'm like, really? That's your big complaint, is that, your Uber is 5 minutes late. You didn't have to walk 20 miles because your transport didn't show up or your transport broke down. You didn't run out of water because somebody didn't prepare and have enough water for an event. You know,
Right.
you're not complaining. You're complaining that the food wasn't what it was supposed to be. You don't understand that in the military, in the Marine Corps, I go to the field and the youngest, newest Marine eats first. And me being the senior Marine, I eat last. That way,
Yeah.
they're the ones who are doing 90% of the work. They're getting food first. They're being taken care of. And if we run out of food, I don't need it as much as they do. And they don't understand how things can really be. And they've never really had to put up with anything hard. And right now it's snowing out, it's cold, and people are complaining, and I'm just like, yeah, go live in a snow cave in the Rockies at Bridgeport. See how you feel.
Yeah, in certain shifts in the ER, people will be complaining about certain things, and I'll say, well, you have sneakers on,
Yeah,
you got these nice pajamas on, right? Got this roof over your head, it's not raining on you. You got coffee at your desk, you're gonna go on break, it's guaranteed, right? It's coming up in an hour. How bad can it be, right? Or I'll never forget this Captain Rabel. He was Slayer of Souls. That was his nickname. And he came back from a deployment, and he told me this story where he took his kids to Disneyland in California, and it was a very busy day. I think he had just gotten back like a day or two before, and he's in Disneyland with his family, and it's every ride you had to wait like 20 or 30 minutes, and everyone else it sucked, but for him, he was just thrilled. He just could not. He was on cloud nine the whole time. He told me he didn't care how long the lines were. He didn't even care if he ever got to the ride. He was just so grateful to be back and to be with his family, and that probably epitomizes what we're talking about. You learn what hard work is. One thing I learned very early on at Camp Pendleton when I got there is that you can't complain in front of Marines. I remember going to the field, doing sick call I had to wake up at 3:30 in the morning, especially when I lived off base, to get to the field by 4:30 for sick call sometimes, and I was just being, I'm so tired, and some sergeant is like, Doc, all you really need is 6 hours of sleep every 3 days. What are you complaining for? It's like, you just can't complain to a seasoned Marine about anything. And I learned not to. And I learned very quickly, there's a lot of complaints that I had that weren't worth complaining about. And that has stuck with me. And it's actually a very nice way to live when you're not focused on the things that annoy you or the things that you feel like aren't uncomfortable. You're just focused on what's working and where you are in that, and you just had this whole other element of just petty squabbles and gossip, or it's not even a part of your life. And I think sometimes that's where veterans kind of come off like dicks. I guess it's like you're not in tune with this very human element of complaining about everything or I think sometimes they're why are you making the best of this situation? Like, what's wrong with you? What's your problem?
Yep.
But was it really that bad? Is it? Because that last time I checked, you're guaranteed to go home at the end of the shift, and you're not going home hungry, and you're not going home hurt. So I don't know. I guess it can look a certain way to some people, but I love it. I find it very helpful to just focus on what's working, and if something's not working well, to just have that. How can I improve it? And of course, that's part of living in the civilian world where you may not be able to improve it, and then you have to make a decision how to go forward from that. But at least you're gonna
really.
You'll own the path that you decide to walk on.
It's really strange that people will complain about something, and I'll be like, okay, how do we make it better? How do we fix it? How do we get, and they're like, what do you mean? I go,
well, slow down there.
You've got a problem. What's the solution? Well, I don't know.
Adapt and overcome, right?
And they're like, I don't know. And I go, well, then why are you complaining? Give me a solution so we can fix it. We can make things better. Don't just sit there and complain that, something's wrong or isn't working. let's make it better. And
Yeah.
they're like, well, that's not my job. That's not what I'm supposed to do. And it's like, wait a minute, you've got enough time to complain about it. You're upset about it. Let's fix it. And so, but they're not willing to do that. It's like, okay, don't talk to me anymore.
Yeah. I kind of hold on to all the veterans that I work with, and we'll you don't really have to say much. Could be a look, could be a couple of jokes here. I can't say most of the jokes that I remember in college. So I did 5 years active duty. I was with the School of Infantry West, and I went to the Navy Clinic in Italy, and then I deployed with 1st Battalion, 4th Marines, and then I got out, and then I was in nursing school in Philadelphia, and I at that time I thought I was going to go back into the military as a Navy nurse, and I don't know, I felt like as I was losing my medical skills in nursing school, so I decided, I'm like, time in this time in, I'll do the reserves, and then I'll go back in, as a Navy nurse. Never panned out, but so as soon as I entered a reserve unit, which I learned very quickly, reserves is kind of like you're either a reservist and always were, or you were prior active duty and we're going to rely on you to get everything done, and the prior active duty, they kind of stick together. But as soon as I got in, some gunnery, no, not gunnery sergeant, it was a chief, it was a Navy chief. He came to me. He's from 3rd Battalion, 14th Marines Artillery, and he drove an hour. He's like, look, I need you. You know how the Marines are. You do your job, and they leave you alone. You want to study for nursing school? Have at it. Just do what you have to do when you're with them, and when you're done, study all you want, right? Another thing I loved about being a Greenside corpsman, because on the Navy side, it's like, oh, you don't have anything to do? We'll find you something to do. But with the Marines, it's like, take care of your Marines, and then you're good to go. At least at that point. And that's what I did. I did that, and nursing school, you can't do anything. Even during the clinicals, you're just basically a glorified tech doing vital signs. First weekend, I'm involved in suturing someone up. We're putting IVs in. We're doing shots. I'm triaging people. I'm prescribing medication. It was amazing. It was amazing. But that was a great experience as well. See it. It's just to have been back. We were talking. I had mentioned before. You meet somebody and you're like instantly pals. I got 2 lifelong friends from that little bit of time that I spent in the reserves. Both one corpsman deployed 4 times as an active duty with the Marine. Well, 3 times with the Marines, 1 with a SEAL team. This corpsman, like this guy is just incredible. We're lifelong friends. Another friend of mine who is a reservist corpsman there, who's also a police officer. We're lifelong friends. And again, it's just like the bond is just incredible. I had to stop going to the veteran lounge in college because I would shoot the breeze and not get any studying done. We just be talking just stories, just, one story after another, just exchanging tales, and I'm like, I can't get anything done. It feels too good.
Yep.
It feels too good. I wound up rescuing a cat on the streets of Philly and just studying at home so I wouldn't be alone. But I couldn't get anything done. It was just it was too awesome of a lounge.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, those are the things I miss the most. Talking to you. Thank you for doing this, Gunny.
Oh, my pleasure.
Seeing what you're doing has inspired me. Seeing what you were doing, I'm like, I got to call the American Legion and get this thing going because I want to do it.
Well, I mean, the thing to think about is, I checked once online. I Googled veterans organizations, and I think there's like 500 national veterans organizations along with the American Legion. So something to think about is if that's not the right fit for your Legion, there's other organizations out there that you could work with that might be a better fit. So don't just.
Do you have any place in particular to go to, like online or any?
Well, like I said, I mean, just Google national
Google it.
veterans organizations, 501c, they'll all come up. The big ones will come up. Look on social media. Whatever it is you're trying to get into. There's equine therapy now. Where they take veterans and they go take care of horses and to help with their PTSD. There's all sorts of organizations out there, and just like the military, the guy who's in charge of your local legion might not see your vision, but
Yeah, that's a good point.
in a year or two, there'll be a different guy that's in charge of that legion, and he might think that your idea, your program is the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Right.
So, those are things to think about and keep in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. That's important to know. Who knows? It might not be the right fit, and to don't get discouraged. Just keep going out and trying to find a place to belong to. Yeah, I want to thank you again for doing this. Wait, let me just stop for a second. I'm going to thank you, and then I'll hit on I'll turn off the record button, and then I'll say then I'll really say thank you and everything.
Yeah.
So. Let me think. How do I want to say this? See, I can't do live yet. This table, I have the smallest table. It keeps moving. I need to fix that.
Yeah. So my laptop is on the drawer of my table with an inverted tray, so that it gets up to a level where it's almost eye level, as opposed to me like just hunched over looking down at it. So that
Yeah.
so that this is in the background.
Yeah, I decided I really don't have any good background, so I was just like, let me do this.
I mean, it's a good. I like it. The only thing is, I don't like the blue screen because it chops your head a little weird sometimes.
Yeah, I noticed that. And your hair kind of goes out there.
Yeah,
you don't want to look like. I have a couple of straggly hairs, but they're gone for the blue screen. It would not work out for you. Your beard would be like a half oval.
Yeah, I know. So
yeah, it wouldn't work out.
And this is the Viking Tree of Life, Urgisil.
Yeah, I know that.
And
That's great.
well, I mean, and if that's the crazy thing as also one of the things that I do is not just studying military history but history in general. The Vikings, who have Odin, and to gain knowledge, he tied himself to the Tree of Life. And you go to Christianity, and you have the fruit of the Tree of Knowledge. And that's the same exact thing that Odin did, is he got knowledge from hanging from a tree.
So you're an avid reader. I remember hearing. Were you an avid reader while you were in the Corps, or at least American history you read about?
I would read history. I did a lot when I was a lot younger. My grandmother in the family that adopted me, she was the librarian at our school. So it was one of the things that, I was always able to do is
Forget it. Like that personal family culture. Like my mom was a reporter at one point for a newspaper and big on writing. So I would write and she would edit. I mean, how could you not get? It's infectious. And then once you get bit by the reading bug, you kind of jarred a memory again. I was at field medical training, and I was an avid reader. And I didn't really have a book, so I was at like the PX, and it was like they had like the like the little turnstile thing with like the little thin books on there. And I was like, oh, let me read this thing. It was by Colonel B.P. McCoy, and again, I'm 29. I'm at field medical training. I already belong to the School of Infantry, so I know I'm going to go back. I'm going to work in field section. I'm feeling a little bit more familiar with Marines at that point. Like I'm starting to kind of get it and really get hungry and really start building that. I was really building a pride about what I was doing. And I read this book by Colonel B.P. McCoy, and it really changed my perception in a profound way, because he was talking about Marines, and he was talking about the mindset of a warfighter. And he's like, a Marine is willing to make the ultimate sacrifice, but nobody goes into combat zone expecting to die, or like how did he explain it?
You don't have a death
butchering it.
wish.
No one has a death wish, right?
Yeah.
If it happens, it happens. But he was talking about what made the warrior mentality so strong, and he summed it up in like it's like two halves to a coin. Half, they have to know that not only when they fire downrange, not only their target, they expect the man to their right and to their left to also hit their targets. So it's sort of like a competency in what you're doing in the act of fighting a war. And he said the other half was expecting that if you go down, you can expect the best possible medical care available in that situation. That if somebody can get to you, they will. And if they can stabilize you, they'll do everything they can to stabilize you and to get you out of there. Which, again, from Buddy Aid to Corpsman Aid, and I took that very seriously from that moment on. I realized, I guess you could say it was empowering. It connected me to the Marine Corps in that way, saying, these guys, they expect, well, one, they expect me to be able to do what they're doing in terms of, firing down range. But if one of them goes down, it is my job to make sure that there is no doubt in their mind that I won't do everything in my power to save them. And I'm going to do everything in my power to also make everyone competent to help each other. Like I took it very seriously from that point on. I think part of it was like I was, 28, 29, 30. And I wasn't right out of high school, and I did have a grown man's perception of things, and I guess more of a father, more of a father-like figure. I mean, they called me Papa Doc many times. I'm like a grandfather. I'm a grandfather at 29 years old. I got combat instructors who seem like they lived 4 lifetimes who are like 25.
Yeah.
26, and here I am I'm a boot at like 29. So, but yeah, so that it was, it's just important to point out like that, it's so much of like there's so much education, so much experience that isn't accounted for in the civilian world. That you're reading, and people were encouraged to read by the Marine instructors at that command. And also just leadership in general, like when I deployed, to exercise your mind, exercise your body. It's just like it's spiritual, it's physical, it's mental, and it's just something you have that you encompass as a person. Like it's not just a job that you did. Like when you get out, oh yeah, I used to study that, and I switched it up. I used to be a mechanic. It's just like this entire existence. I'm kind of going off in a direction. I'm not really sure where I'm going. But,
Well, I mean,
it's somewhere in that I'm praising the Marines and what they do.
You reminded me of the interview I did on Urban Valor. I'm doing this interview with you. I've done a couple other ones. I really don't think about the impact it may have outside of you and me, because it's you and me. We're talking and we're connecting. We're veterans, and we're discussing issues that are important to us as veterans. And but so the Urban Valor video gets out. It's on YouTube. It goes to Facebook. It goes to Instagram. It goes to TikTok. It goes to all these social media platforms. And then once again, I get a message from somebody I don't know, a picture I don't recognize, a name I have no clue what it means. I'm about to just delete it, but I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna look at it, and this has caused me to reply to every message I get on social media, and to thank somebody who follows me on social media, because I
do the same thing.
I don't know who they are all the time. I don't recognize them, and so I open it up and. It's like, hey, Gunnery Sergeant, how you doing? Blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, yeah, okay, whatever. And then since I had replied, he goes, this is such and such. Do you remember me? And I'm just like, oh my gosh. He was my guide in my first platoon as a drill instructor back in 1999. And I'm just like, wow, this is just blows my mind. And so then he shows me a picture. He retired from the Marine Corps as a major, right? He went in from the enlisted and got commissioned. And I'm just like,
Wow.
now I'm like, wow, that's really good. Then he got out and he did a career in law enforcement, had a second career. And he shows me a picture of, him with his family now. And I'm just blown away by, everything that he's done. And he turns around and goes, "This is all because of you." And I'm like, "What do you mean, me?" And he's like, "You taught me this as a recruit. You were a drill instructor. You did this and this." And I'm like, "Yeah, dude, I'm a knuckle dragger. I didn't graduate high school. I didn't. I tried to go back to college. It didn't work. I'm not that kind of guy. Everything that you did is on you. I trained you to be a Marine. And you took that and you made it your own, and you accomplished what you did because of who you are. I gave you the basics. You expanded on it as you should.
Yeah.
That's how Marines expect it. I teach you something, you take it, you make it better."
Yeah. Yeah, and that's great. Yeah, especially as a instructor, like you touch so many Marines. I served with people who had done that, and now we're deployed together, and then like younger Marines would come up to them like, "Hey, you taught me everything." I was lucky enough to get my FMF pin on deployment by the very I had two instructors in A school, both Greenside Corpsmen, but by the very instructor who I modeled, who I don't say modeled myself, but who really put that Greenside energy in me, and who I always looked to as the standard. I actually deployed with this guy, and he pinned me with the FMF pin on deployment, and it's one of the greatest moments of my life. Like looking at this guy eye to eye, 3.5, 4 years later, feeling like, in my own way, surpassing his expectations. And it was such an amazing feeling. And I'm sure you provided that for a lot of people. Would you mind if I just peed really quick?
No, go ahead.
I just want to, before I end it, I don't want to look all jittery. I mean, 1 second, okay? Thank you so much.
Yep.